And Al Gore? Gore opposed bipartisan reform. He's pushing a big government plan that lets Washington bureaucrats interfere with what your doctors prescribe. The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide. The Bush prescription plan, seniors choose.
Did you catch that? The word rats spliced into a political ad about candidate Al Gore during the 2000 election. Critics accused the Bush campaign of trying to subliminally link the unflattering word with the Democratic Party. George W. Bush called it an accident. Now take a look at this, a gin ad from 1971 that appeared on the inside back cover of Time magazine. When you zoom in, you can see the word sex seemingly engraved in the ice cubes. So-called subliminal messages like these have long been used to stoke fears that images or words processed by our unconscious could provoke us to do unconscionable things. Now, new research is confirming hidden messages can sway our behavior. But our next guest says that doesn't mean we're getting brainwashed. With us now is Ingrid Wicklegren, an editor at Scientific American Mind. Welcome, Ingrid. So this issue has fascinated me since I was a kid. There was, at the time, a famous book called Subliminal Seduction. We have the cover, I think, from the mid-'70s. I did my first school report on this, you know, all these hidden things in different magazines and ads. There's a real history. This has been a kind of a concern or a craze for decades. Walk us first through a little bit of the history of the concern about this and how researchers have approached it.
Right, so the history dates back to the 1950s when an independent marketing researcher claimed, he held a press conference in 1957 claiming that he had flashed messages, buy popcorn and drink Coca-Cola to moviegoers. And as a result, the popcorn sales went up and Coke sales went up. So this provoked quite an uproar. People then, you know, were very upset that, you know, maybe this was happening in advertising, and there were editorials coming out against subliminal messaging, and basically, but researchers couldn't confirm. They tried to repeat the experiments, and they couldn't confirm it. And 5 years later, it turned out that this man, Vickery, told everyone that it was a gimmick. So the extreme claims of the effect of subliminal messaging are really unwarranted. So that's where the history started. But what happened was, despite the fact that Vickery sort of took his statements back, people, you know, as usually happens, the initial claims get far more publicity than the retractions do. So for a very long time, people were afraid that subliminal messages could really change our minds and our behavior in a major way.
And yet, as this research has gone forward, because there's always been, what I loved about the piece in your magazine is that there's always been kind of interest in this among academics and psychologists and those who study these things. And even if those initial overinflated claims got debunked, there is, I guess, what your piece is showing is there is a way that this does seem to have some influence in limited circumstances. Explain what folks should know about this.
Yeah, absolutely. What happened is that even though subliminal messages can't really completely change, you know, our opinions, they can't make us do unconscionable things or things we wouldn't otherwise do. They do have subtle influences on us, but they're only under certain circumstances. So we have to be ready for the message. For example, if we're given a suggestion, a subliminal suggestion of Lipton iced tea, and we're already thirsty, and we haven't already made up our mind about which drink we're going to have, the message of the iced tea, the Lipton iced tea message, will increase the chances that we will choose that over another beverage. But it has to be, we have to be ready for it at that time. There can't be a commercial a week before, and I mean, well, there could be, but that's not going to influence our choice of buying Lipton iced tea the next time we walk into a deli.
Now, I still think, even when it's not subliminal, when I sit in a movie theater and sometimes they show the Cokes and the popcorn stuff just before the movie starts, it's not subliminal, but I find I'm very susceptible. I suddenly say, wow, I'm thirsty. You know, I think I'm going to go get a drink. Does that mean I'm just one of these kind of weak, suggestible people, and it can be explicit and it works on me?
We're all weak and suggestible in that way. There are all kinds of influences on our subconscious, or sort of, you know, as we walk around in our daily lives. If we pass by a coffee shop and the aroma of the coffee, we smell the aroma of the coffee, that might make us want an espresso right then. So, and you know, there are also very interesting experiments of sort of more subtle influences in consumer marketing in which people respond. Their buying behavior is responds to the type of music somebody plays in a store. So classical music will cause people not to buy more in a wine shop, but to buy more expensive wine as opposed to pop music. So there are these subtle influences, but it's really not a bigger influence than a lot of the influences that we have as we just walk about and smell things and taste things and see things out of the corner of our eye, which remind us to do things. That's, I think, the order of the influence of these messages.
And so are there still serious, is there a community of researchers devoted to trying to push the frontiers of this research further? Or is this, do we think we kind of know what the possibilities and limitations are, and we don't need to worry about mind control and, you know, being victimized by, you know, powers that be that are trying to propagandize us without our even knowing it?
I think that it's still an active research field. What happened was that the claims of brainwashing and you know, making us do horrible things because of things recorded backwards on records and these sorts of things were unsubstantiated. And for a while, the research field was fairly dead. But as we've discovered some more of these subtle influences, I think that researchers are very interested in exactly what those influences are. Under what circumstances are we going to be persuaded? How long is the time window during which we can be, you know, very subtly manipulated by these messages? I think I mean, the subconscious is a very interesting area, and I think this sort of speaks to what extent all kinds of environmental influences affect us.
And so what about these, there are musicians like Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, you know, who've, you know, they sort of encode or put some kind of hidden messages in their, Marilyn Manson, in their music. Should we indict them for that, or is that just a kind of gimmick, part of the, part of the act?
I think it's probably part of the act, or should be chalked up to be. I remember people getting very excited about these messages back in the 1980s. You know, with the records, you could sort of try to play them backwards and hear them, and you know, I remember my friends were very excited about this stuff, and you know, I was a little skeptical because I don't know, I had other things to worry about. But I think you know, you can record these things backwards, which is, I don't know, it's kind of cool. But there was absolutely no data that these backmasked messages left any traces in memory. So they're really nothing to worry about. And I think they probably were a fairly successful gimmick, since I remember them all these years later.
Ingrid Wicklegren, editor of American Scientific Mind, thanks very much for going through the subliminal mind effects that we need to know about today. Thanks again.
All right, thanks for having me, Matt.
Coming up on Hardball.